Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Spiritual Fitness with your host, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk, and myself, JM. Spiritual Fitness is a program dedicated to exploring the timeless text and practices of Bhakti Yoga for people who want wisdom in their everyday life. We have close to 10 members on Zoom and more than 50 members on Facebook. Srivatsa is helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome to Spiritual Fitness. You're on mute.
Thank you very much, JM. Good to see you. And really happy to be back with all of you. Hey, Josh, good to see you. Jose, good to see you. Wolf, Srivatsa, Estasoju, Shrestha. Thank you for coming back. Nice to have you along today. And we are going to go back in time to some of the teachings of Sri Chaitanya, who gave us a really beautiful metaphor for growing in life. And literally it's a growth process because it's a metaphor for our lives as gardeners. So Chaitanya lived 500 years ago and taught the process of bhakti yoga. And in his teachings, which he made really accessible to everybody, including us, he gave the teachings of bhakti yoga as a description of gardening. And today we'll go into some of the aspects that he taught so that we can shore up our gardens and help to cultivate them more deeply. And also today I'm going to talk a little bit about weeding the garden and how important that is. So today you can consider yourself a gardener, whether you've had the opportunity to get out there or not this year. We are all gardeners, according to Chaitanya. So before we go into some of the metaphor and how we can apply it in our life, let's just start off with a little bit of introspection and take a look at our gardens. So if you'll sit up a little straighter than you were a second ago and close your eyes, and then bring your mind to attention. Relax, but stay alert. And you can start by focusing on your breath. And it's a relief to be able to breathe a little more deeply than you may have been earlier. Breath regulates the mind, nourishes all of the cells in the body. They breathe and they need oxygen. And you can think out as you're exhaling and in as you're inhaling. And have gratitude for your breath. It's being provided. The mechanism to breathe, the oxygen, it's all available to us. We can't do without it, even for a few seconds. And now bring your attention to your heart. And think of your heart as a garden. What if it were a garden? How would you treat it? A garden starts with some potential, a plot of earth. You can do with it whatever you wish. And if you do nothing, that's also doing something, because you'll see very quickly that the garden fills up with all kinds of plants that you didn't ask for. So looking at your own heart now from within as a garden. Just look and see, following this picture, what kind of plants you've deliberately put in, how they've grown, and see if you can notice any weeds that may have grown. Sometimes habits just pop up out of nowhere. I wonder, how did I get started with this? How do I get rid of it? It's perplexing, but every gardener knows seeds, or I should say weeds, never take a day off. And good gardeners don't either. So take a good look around, inventory your garden. What's growing there? And now we'll implement the process called mantra meditation, which is actually the act of both planting a seed and watering a seed. The mantra itself that we'll chant is seed-like. It's one syllable, but it'll expand after you put it in the soil of your heart and water it with your attention. If you look at an ordinary seed, you'll notice that it's small, perhaps black or brown, and looks insignificant. But after you plant it and water it, a miracle happens. It sprouts. And if you take care of it, it grows and produces flowers and fruits. Same with mantra. This mantra comes from the oldest text in the world called the Rig Veda, oldest book known to humankind. In the Sanskrit language, it's a seed-like mantra. And it's pronounced Om. So I'm going to say this, and imagine now as you're saying this mantra, stay in the garden of your heart and imagine that you're planting this seed in the soil as you say it. So I'll say the mantra 3 times, and behind muted mics, you can also say the mantra with me. Stay in that vision of the garden within your heart, full of potential, fully dependent on what you plant and what you weed out. It's your individual plot. You're an individual. You have the opportunity to shape it the way you wish. Bring your attention back to your breath. And you can rub your hands together and make some friction. Bring your attention back into the external. So if your heart were a garden plot, then you would have the opportunity to plant some things and take out some other things. Of course, there's a process of cultivation. There's a process of weeding. There's watering. there's a mending. And Sri Chaitanya, when he taught about the practice of bhakti yoga, said, all of these are aspects of the bhakti practice. Think of yourself as a gardener. Now, when it comes to weeding, which is what I'm going to talk about today, here's some advice from Corvallis, Oregon, from a horticulturalist at the University of Oregon, when he says that unsightly and seemingly uncontrollable weeds have a way of taking over the garden in the time it takes to put the hoe away. Unsightly and seemingly uncontrollable weeds have a way of taking over the garden in the time it takes to put the hoe away. So it's unfathomable where these weed seeds come from. For gardeners, those who garden know that you didn't necessarily ask for them, they just show up. So this is commensurate with the description in all the ancient yogic texts, including the Yoga Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, with the process of karma. As I've described previously from the Yoga Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita, there's a way in which our minds start as a pristine substance, and then from impressions that we take in from the environment, not just in this life, but in previous lives, we create a field that is planted with various types of seeds. And in fact, one of the ancient Puranas, written thousands of years ago, describes in a Sanskrit verse that goes like this: Aprarabdha palam papam kutam bijam palonmukam kramenaiva priliante Vishnu bhakti ratatmanam. This verse is describing karma, and it says that there are different manifestations of the seeds that get planted because of our activities. And the first one is called aprarabdha, which means that seeds sometimes are in an unmanifest stage. They're just starting, but you can't see the result. Palam, and that another stage is that they're actually giving fruit. Kuta and bija are intermediate stages of the growth. As you know, when you plant a little seed and it starts to sprout, it has various stages before it becomes mature. So all the different ways in which we're planting seeds have to do with the way we move about the world, the things that we look at, the way we associate ourselves, and so forth, say these ancient texts. And all of these experiences go into the garden of our heart, and they begin to grow as seeds. In talking about weeding out the unwanted plants, and as a gardener myself, I can say there are myriad varieties of plants, weeds that come in, and they're fascinating. This particular horticulturalist from the University of Oregon gives the advice: you need time and patience to take out these unwanted seeds. They could come in the form of bad habits in our own hearts. He says also that plants, especially vegetables, have a hard time thriving in the company of unwelcome neighbors that compete for water, light, and nutrients. Some also harbor pests and diseases. So the actual goal of our life and the direction we want to go gets hampered by various weeds that suck out our energy, mostly our attention, takes it in different directions, and we lose valuable garden space to these weeds. So there are various ways to take out weeds, but first let me just give you a short catalog of weeds and how long they can last. And this I'm relating to the seeds of karma that can be planted at any given time, and then they can sprout later. So everything that we do has a consequence, and the way that we move about the world is important. So some seeds, for instance, the field bindweed, can last up to 50 years in the soil before it sprouts. It just sits there in a potential stage, and when the right circumstances come, then it sprouts. 50 years. Lamb's quarters may last up to 4 decades. But I'd like to tell you about a particular weed that is common in my garden. I see it every spring. And it has branches that jut upwards towards the sky. And on the tip of every one of its little branches, it has a pod. And the gardener who helps me from time to time in my garden taught me about these years ago. He said, you have to get them on time, because if you wait too long, as soon as you touch them, in order to take them out of the ground, they pop. And every one of those little pods explodes like a firecracker. And you can hear it. It goes pop, pop, pop. And you can feel the seeds hitting your face and your gloves, and they spray all over the whole garden. And so he told me that a good gardener knows the weeds and takes them out early enough so that they don't become mature. Because once they become mature, then they have a way of self-perpetuating. So that goes too in the process of taking out unwanted things from our hearts in the garden of our hearts. Do it early. And there's a progression mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita of the ways in which we take in some of our weeds. And this is described by Krishna in the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when he's giving a summary of what's called Sankhya, or the way that the world works. And he says, Jayato Vishayan Pumsam Sangas Teshu Pajayate, Sangat Sanjayate Kama, Kamat Krodho Bijayate. So what this means is, when you contemplate certain objects of the senses in this world, and let me give you a definition of contemplation. Contemplation means that you look at something thoughtfully for a long time, and then you think, there's something in it for me. This could be mine, or I want this. You develop an attachment to it by looking at it. And my spiritual teacher used to say that there are many unnecessary necessities, and it's easy to get attached to them just by looking at them. In fact, nowadays, and probably not just nowadays, but it's rampant in society now, that people put up all kinds of pictures, signs, and digital images trying to attract our attention so that we'll contemplate something. Like, here's a 5-pack of t-shirts, and you weren't thinking I needed a 5-pack of t-shirts, but if it comes up frequently enough and it's described in the advertisement that the cloth is buttery smooth and it will make you look like an Adonis or some kind of goddess by wearing this t-shirt, then you might start contemplating it. It's an unnecessary necessity. You may already have enough t-shirts, but if you look at it, then you might think, oh, I have to have this. And so jayato means contemplation. I'm looking at certain things and I have to have this. Jayato vishayam pumsam sangas. I develop a connection with them, that this is for me. Teshu pajayate, sangat sanjayate, kama. And then I develop a strong desire. Kamat krodo bijayate. And then kama, krodo means anger, bijayate, there's a way in which after I connect with these objects, then they become frustrating for me and I can become angry about it. And then as I become more and more absorbed in unnecessary necessities and these weeds grow up, then I lose my way in the weeds. I get lost in the weeds and I forget the purpose of life. I become forgetful. So the process of yoga really means to clean the garden, weed the garden, take out the unnecessary necessities, and simultaneously cultivate the soil and also plant wisely. So Chaitanya said that there's a seed of bhakti. We're talking about bhakti yoga. So this metaphor, he continues by saying, the seed of bhakti you get from a gardener. And I can attest to this. I needed, or I wanted in my garden, some camellias, but I didn't want the regular kind of camellias that you find around the peninsula because they have no scent. I don't know if any of you have noticed this about camellias. They're one of the most beautiful flowers. Isn't it a nice flower? Is anybody familiar? Camellias? I mean, they're gorgeous flowers, but I never saw one that had a scent before until I went to Japan. And I noticed the camellias there that they were scented. I said, how did that happen? Well, very purposefully. And so when I came back to California, I said, I have to get some Japanese camellia. And it took a long, hard search. And I connected with the right gardener and I ordered that scented camellia. And lo and behold, now I have several growing quite nicely. The point is, for the bhakti lata, you have to get it from the right gardener, somebody who already has it, has a connection. And this is a special seed. So Sri Chaitanya, in describing the gardening process for yoga, means find somebody who already has that vibration coming from them, that's not encumbered, that has already a practice going. And then you can inquire from such a person and get the seed of bhakti. So he called the bhakti lata bij. A bij in Sanskrit means a seed. I described earlier how there are seeds of karma, and then there's a bhakti seed. So it's a special seed. You have to go out of your way to get it. And once you get it, you want to make sure that you plant it in your heart and then you take care of it. So the soil has to be nice. And then you also have to water it. And then you have to weed, because as we heard from our horticulturalist, if you don't weed, then it will pull away from the nutrients that you're getting from your bhakti lata bij. It's a snap quiz here. What is the bhakti lata bij? What's bij? Anyone?
Is seed.
Yeah. Who said that?
This is Pankaj.
Hey, Pankaj, thank you very much. Yes, it's a seed. Seeds, let's digress for a minute, or maybe it's not a digression. Yes?
There's a question on Zoom from Ariana.
Yeah?
Asks, how do I stop myself from saying I need those camellias or that nice 5-pack of t-shirts?
That's a good question. And that's one of the ways in which, and that's not to say there's anything wrong with t-shirts. And of course, as you just heard, I went out of my way to get camellias, so there's not necessarily anything bad. But going to the metaphor of unnecessary necessity, going back to the point of unnecessary necessities and how to avoid weeds, there are ways in which when you make the soil resilient to weeds, they grow far less frequently. You can help the process by taking care of the soil and by taking out those weeds as soon as possible before they germinate. He says here, does our horticulturalist, weed seeds can survive in the soil for years before they germinate and grow. Undisturbed weeds tend to persist longer than seeds subjected to periodic tillage. So in the metaphor, the tillage really is think about what you're taking in. And so, as I mentioned in previous classes, there's a process that Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras calls Kriya Yoga. There are three aspects to it. And this is also parallel with what is taught by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. It's called swadhyaya, or self-contemplation. Take a minute to notice, like we did in the beginning of this session, what's actually growing in your heart. What do you want there? If you don't organize your garden, if you don't decide what you're going to plant, then anything can come in and just take over. So another saying that I like very much is, and I just want to hear your reaction to this saying. The first time I heard it, I said, wait, what? And then I listened and oh, this is good. I'm keeping it. Here it comes. The best fertilizer is the gardener's shadow. I'll say it again, then somebody tell me what it means. The best fertilizer is the gardener's shadow. Somebody tell me.
Hi, Vaish.
Hey, Joshua.
So I don't have outdoor space or vegetables, but I have a lot of houseplants. And you had used that saying way earlier this year in one of the sessions, and it just stuck with me so much. So, I think the plants can tell if I'm in a good mood or not. And I think what the saying means is that the care I give to the plants, which is love, is important to them. Very important.
Yes, I like that. That's a very personal way of looking at it. The plants actually pick up on the vibration of the persons who take care of them, right? Nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My mother was a gardener, and she used to talk about that all. She'd talk to her plants, and she swore that they were the one, when she was taking care of them, they were responding to the kind of care and attention. And there were a couple more that came in, right, JM?
Yeah, A. Malik said the same thing, care. And I think for the previous question, S. Rajupal responded seed. Beej means seed.
Beej means seed.
Yeah.
I'll use that a few more times, beej, and it means seed. And care, the best fertilizer is a gardener's shadow. If you're out there walking around, your shadow is on the plants, means you're present, then you're going to be attentive to what's going on. Like I planted some marigolds earlier this year from seed, different strains of marigolds that I got from a reputable seed sales place and in the Midwest. And so it grew up, and then I've been meaning to get to it, but I didn't until this morning. But somehow I noticed that some of the leaves were turning dark, which is not very good on a marigold seed. So I brought my chair over. I sat down carefully so I could really look in close and see what was going on. And I noticed that there was some kind of insects that were getting in and just thought it was a salad bar or something. And were eating those marigolds and causing them to die. And so I cleared out a lot of the dead stuff, but that didn't happen day after day because I was busy doing other things. But till I finally cast my shadow on that plant and really looked deeply into it, what's going on here? I wasn't able to help the plant, but I think I did significantly today by taking away a lot of the dead stuff. And so back to your question, stop myself from saying I need these unnecessary necessities, if that's what they are. It takes a little bit of care. That's the word we got from Malik. Care. You have to care. You have to look in closely and say, what's actually going on? What kind of garden do I want? What's growing in my heart? And if there's something I don't want, then I have to start the weeding process. You have to take out unwanted plants that have decided to grow there as volunteers. And how to do that? There's the Kriya Yoga process. So it's called Swadhyaya, or self-contemplation. Take take time to look and see how you are. What kind of habits do you have now? What kind of seeds or habits do you want to develop? And one of the very practical ways that one self-examines, according to Patanjali and Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, is to read wisdom texts. These wisdom texts have these axiomatic truths that are very applicable to our lives. For instance, the one I mentioned, Jayato Vishayam Pumsam, there's a consequence to where I cast my glance. If I just randomly look anywhere, I'm going to pick up all kinds of seeds that are going to go in. If I'm more deliberate in how I'm taking in what I'm taking in from the world, then my garden will begin to take shape. And the wisdom texts help us to strengthen our resolve and also to decide where to put our valuable attention. Remembering that your attention is like water. So in the watering process, part of it is what you're giving attention to in your mind and in your heart. And the third aspect of this Kriya Yoga is mantra meditation. We did a little bit at the beginning by repeating the syllable Om, but the mantra itself has a potency. And the mantra is also part of the watering process. When you're repeating the mantra, you're watering the bhakti lata bij, or the seed of bhakti within your heart. But Sri Chaitanya said you have to be careful because you're pouring water, but besides the bhakti bij, who else likes water? Who else will be happy to drink the water out there? The weeds. Yeah.
Yes.
The weeds like water too. So he said, there's a twofold process going on here, that you're watering by chanting your mantra and hearing from the wisdom texts. And at the same time, you have to recognize that there are other seeds that are picking up the water and they're starting to grow also. So you want to take them out of your garden. So I mentioned before, weeds never take time off. Every gardener knows this. And that was mentioned by our horticulturalist today from Oregon. He says that the weeds have a way of taking over the garden in the time it takes to put your hoe away. So you just took them out and they're already starting to come back, right? So a gardener has to be vigilant. But here a little bit of advice about weeding, because if there's a lot of weeds, it can seem overwhelming to weed the whole garden. How will I ever do it? So one technique that I have practically, and this relates to the metaphor of taking the bad plants or the weeds out of your heart, is to weed a little bit at a time. You could say, here's a small patch over here. And from this patch, I'm just going to concentrate on this small patch and get it nice and clean. And I find that by doing that, I feel encouraged because that's something I can actually handle. And once I do that, then I'm encouraged to move to another spot in the garden and do a little bit more. So I may not be able to take out all the weeds. I don't even know where they all are yet inside my heart, but I can gradually, a little bit at a time, deal with one and then another. So let's see if, yes, please go ahead.
So Shivasa just posted a message from Facebook from Ruben Pillai. He was answering to the question, what does the phrase meant? To create a shadow, you have to stand over the plant. So that's what the best fertilizer is garden's shadow. That's what he meant.
Yes. And if I'm there, if I'm seeing what's going on, then I can do something about it. But if I ignore the garden, if I don't look at it, just let it go, it'll be overrun in no time. Or it won't get enough water. And the plants that I want to grow will just wither up and die. And there's all kinds of opportunists that come into the garden all the time. They come from outer space. In fact, there was some very interesting looking bug that came into the tomatoes a few years ago, and it really looked like it was from another planet. I took a picture and mentioned it to a local nursery, and they laughed. They named what kind of a bug it was, but it really liked tomatoes. I don't mind as long as they don't take them all. Yes.
We have one more from Ronak, who say on Facebook, which was just posted. He says, "This is very thoughtful analogy, and it reminds me of a quote by the Brazilian poet Mario Quintana that I really love. Don't waste your time chasing butterflies. Mend your garden, and the butterflies will come."
Can you say that again? It's so good.
Don't waste your time chasing butterflies. Mend your garden, and the butterflies will come.
Nice. That's really valuable advice. If you take care of what you put into your garden, it will attract the right kind of personalities, like hummingbirds and butterflies and so forth. Yes, excellent. So taking time every day for self-contemplation, and part of that is chanting japa. So japa, we've talked about before, is a very powerful process for both watering and also having an opportunity to see what's actually in your heart. It's miraculous. So we chant various mantras in japa, and you repeat the mantras over and over again. That's what a mantra is. Man means mind, and tra means to deliver. So if you could take a little time to repeat the mantra and listen to the sound vibration, then the mantra becomes self-revealing. And it also helps you to see a little deeper into what's going on in your garden. And Sri Chaitanya recommended this personally. He gave a poem. Actually, there's 8 poems that he wrote, or it's one poem in 8 stanzas. And in it, he starts by saying that by this process of chanting mantra, doing mantra meditation, he gave the metaphor of in this poem, of a mirror, and you clean the mirror so you can see what's going on. And so when you chant the mantra, it helps you to clarify and see what's going on. It also helps you then to weed the garden, to take out the bad habits. And it's amazing to me how complicated life can be. Does anybody ever notice that? How it gets complex? Anyone? Jose, thank you. Yeah, it's Catherine, thank you very much. Yes. There are complexities. And I would say trying to sort them out individually would be like chasing after the butterflies, one after another. Come in the garden, come in the garden. But by the mantra, my spiritual master used to say, you synchronize all the energies by the mantra. And you're able then to sort out what's really going on. And it helps to align your mind, your intelligence, your resolve. It's kind of watering process. The garden is vibrant and your purpose gets really strong when you take time to do japa. This is mantra meditation that you do for yourself. So in japa, some people sit and other people pace. But the main point is to be in a state where you can really listen to what you're chanting. So you repeat the mantra again and again, and you listen to the sound vibration of the mantra. And as you do, it helps you to clarify what's going on inside you. And you'll notice it as you practice this, that it makes you strong in the sense that through that clarity, the rest of the day, whatever complexities come up are much easier to deal with because you have this much deeper sense of yourself.
We have a question from A. Malik. Can one do mantra meditation before going to bed to keep negative thoughts away?
Yes, highly recommended. Because sleep is you're putting yourself in the hands of your subconscious mind, and who knows what far-flung places you will travel to in your sleep. And there are a lot of various psychological states that are manifested in our sleep. And yes, by doing mantra meditation before you sleep, you can organize your thought patterns, and you can really feel clarified before you go to sleep. So it is highly recommended. Yes, it is a good way to keep negative thoughts away.
Yeah, I also found that like when you're going to sleep and maybe you just played mantra meditation, somehow it feels like it carries throughout the sleep. In the sense, when you wake up, you kind of wake up with that energy as well. Like that plays back again. So kind of, it's not just the time you heard before going to sleep. Even during the sleep, kind of it has its effect as well. Like kind of it's continuing.
Yes, and whatever we do in our waking state, it transfers into our sleeping state as well. My spiritual master used to say he knew someone in his childhood who was a merchant who sold cloth, and all day long he was wholesaling cloth. He was quoting prices all day long. And then he noticed when this man, he would take a nap right in his shop, because in India sometimes you do that. They close down for the hot hours in the day, and he'd take a nap. And he noticed that when he was napping, he was also in his sleep, he was reciting or listing prices. And so similarly, if you're used to doing the mantra when you're awake, then in your sleep also you're doing the mantra. The mantra is a different quality of sound. It's transcendental. It takes you above the fray of the various complexities that are caused by this tangle of weeds that get into your mind and into your heart. So one of the ways in which our horticulturalist from the University of Oregon has suggested that you can avoid weeds is to put in a drip system. So now, when you water broadly, you throw water everywhere on your garden, then gives all the seeds a chance to grow, including the unwanted ones. However, if you're more focused when you chant, which is the watering process, and you place the water right where it should go, then you get a better result. The weeds don't get the water, but the plant or the bhakti lata gets the water. So I've noticed this in my own garden. It took a lot of work to put in a drip system in both the front and backyards. And each one of the plants gets a particular little hose that goes either all the way around it or right next to it with a nozzle. And each nozzle has a color on it according to how much water that particular plant likes or needs. And then when I turn on the system, I can regulate how much water each bed in the garden gets, and then it comes out very scientifically in the right amount. And if it's not, then I have to adjust it. The point is, when we do our contemplation, we can decide how much water should I be giving? Where should I be giving my attention? Part of contemplation is being very clear about where you want to give your attention. This is part of the 21-day fitness challenge, where you take time in the morning to write, or at night before you go to sleep, write down, where am I going to give my attention? And in chanting mantra also, rather than letting your mind just wander anyway, you're chanting and chanting the mantra, and then you're thinking, oh, I'd like to go shopping, or maybe I'll go on a vacation. And the mind just goes, it just wanders off here and there. So in that case, it can be that you're using the mantra and you're just spraying the water on everything. But if you focus and you listen to the mantra more carefully, and you're more deliberate about the way that you say the mantra to rise above the various other weeds and concentrate on the bhakti bij, then it's more effective and the weeds don't take root as heartily as they would have. So here's a thought you can take away is deny weeds the water of your valuable attention. Deny weeds the water of your valuable attention, because where attention goes, energy flows. Your attention is the most valuable thing you have, and it acts like water. And that's the verse I said in the beginning, Dhyato Vishayam Punsam, Sangasteshu Bhajayate. And that is, Dhyato means to meditate or concentrate on something. So wherever you're putting your attention, you're watering. And that's going to grow in your life. And if it's a weed and you give yourself to that particular weed, then it'll grow. It'll become the main thing. Like some people can take up a tiny little habit and think, oh, what's the harm? It goes in as a seed, and then they water it. And then pretty soon it's the main thing in their life. And it takes over everything else. Weeds can do that. They can start taking over. There is a particular kind of plant that was imported from Britain, I believe, to India, and it takes over waterways. Actually, it expands exponentially until it chokes off even waterways, and it's become a scourge. And there are certain kinds of habits or weeds that we can take on that they have the potential to really expand and grow. Other weeds, they may not be as strong. So we have to be really careful about what we bring in and what we water. So for weeding, educate yourself about what's a weed and what isn't. And actually, right from one of the ancient wisdom texts, there are a few that are mentioned right away. A diplomatic behavior, like shading the truth, become a shady character. As we talked about before, some of the yamas and niyamas, these are prerequisites for having a peaceful mind, given in the Yoga Sutras. One of them was truthfulness, satyam, and you tell the truth. Try that for a day and see how it works. And then the opposite here is, it's in Sanskrit called kutinati, or diplomatic behavior. You're always bobbing and weaving to get the most out of it without actually telling the truth. And this kind of behavior is not conducive for growing in spiritual life and letting the bhakti creeper grow. It's a kind of a weed that can grow up. It's like, oh, I can shade the truth because it's expedient right now. But that kind of thing grows and grows, and then it becomes your main purpose in life, is simply to be cunning instead of telling the truth. So that's an example given in one of the ancient bhakti texts about a weed that can grow. Another one is violence, ahimsa. So that was another one of the yamas we learned about, a prerequisite for meditation, which is to be nonviolent. Cause as little violence as you can as you move about the earth, because violent behavior or institutional violence, in all of their habits, comes back to us as a kind of weed that chokes out the bhakti seed and the bhakti creeper. And then mention a couple more: doing activities to try to get mundane adoration or mundane importance. I'm doing everything just as a show, so I can be more adored, or I can seem more important to other people. And these kinds of considerations are examples out of many, many examples of kinds of weeds that can grow up, and they're unwanted. So pull them out before they mature. Let's just hear if you have any reflections from the practical process I mentioned of Kriya Yoga, implementing mantra meditation, and also this self-contemplation and reading of wisdom texts, and how it's working in your practices, or questions you have about implementing it.
You can unmute yourself or type in on Zoom chat.
And for that matter, any other thing that you heard so far that you want to reflect back, that you thought was a point that's useful or interesting.
One thing which I thought interesting was that there could be weeds which can lay in the ground for decades before it sprouts. That was interesting. And it means you can pick up habits and not realize for several years that you actually picked up.
Yes. This goes back to a lot of what we talked about in classes last month and the month before from the Yoga Sutras, when we got really technical and we talked about how the mind is like the cloud, the storage cloud where data goes in. And these eyes, as an example, are little cameras. They're bringing in light images from the world, and sound images are coming in here, and they are registered in the cloud, and it leaves what's called a samskar. And a samskar is really like a latent seed, and in the right circumstances, it manifests, it grows. And karma means that we are being compelled by previous impressions to make choices in certain ways. Someone says, I'm liberal. Someone else says, I'm conservative. Someone else says, I'm independent. I do whatever I want, whenever I want. There are all these ways in which we're predisposed to think in certain ways. And Patanjali says, actually, these are acquired over time. They're images, seeds, if you will, that go into the subconscious mind, and then they come out as impressions, and they're compelling us to move in certain directions. And we talked about how those can be overwritten. New images that are superior, that are beneficial, can be introduced. And that's really the process of gardening. You decide, I want a nice looking garden. It takes a little planning to make a garden that's nice. You have to think about it. You have to make a blueprint, and then you can start planting. It's actually quite exciting. And that the seeds that you put in there, you start to water them, and then there are new impressions that grow up, and meanwhile you're taking out the old ones. And yes, even as you do that, you'll notice that the seeds, I see this all the time. The first gardeners who helped me years ago to get my first garden going here in Burlingame, they had a fondness for tobacco plants because, believe it or not, they put out a very beautiful, fragrant flower. And so they put in a couple tobacco plants, and sure enough, they came out with these beautiful white flowers. However, after I decided they weren't going to stay, or they took off on their own due to a couple hot summers when I was away, tobacco plants keep coming up everywhere because they put out millions of tiny, tiny little seeds, and every season they pop up, and they're just there in the ecosystem. And so similarly, in my subconscious mind, there are all these seeds, not just from this life, says Patanjali or Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, but due to my association. The verse in the Gita says, Purusha prakritisto hi bhunkte prakriti jangunan, karanam guna sangosya sarasad yoni janmasu. We're getting good seeds, bad seeds are sprouting. And these are all due to our previous connections we've had. And they come up all the time. Even we weren't expecting it. Where'd that come from? Oh, we planted that 20 years ago. And the plant hasn't been extant for 10 years now, but still it comes up. Have you ever, any of you had that experience? Things come up and where did that come from? We're very sensitive, and the garden soil that we're working with, the heart, is extremely sensitive. That's good and bad. I mean, the good part is it's full of potential. And we can decide what we want to plant in there, and we can grow something extremely valuable. But on the other hand, if we're a little inattentive as gardeners, and that's our responsibility as humans, to be a little attentive and grow something that's important. Don't just let anything grow. But if we just let it go, then anything will grow. There's a few more that came in, Jay.
Yeah. So there are a couple of. So was there anyone wanting to jump in? No. So there are a
The
couple of.
analysis is
Yes.
really good, and really sinks in, and the more you explore these similarities with the garden and weeds, and like how your consciousness and all that, the more you explore, the more you can relate, and it's really helpful.
Yeah, I love it myself, Badri. Thank you for mentioning that. I'm glad that you really like it. It's not only interesting, it's very helpful, because it helps us to understand what we're going through.
Yeah, as we know, like the consciousness, it has nothing polluted in it, right? Like it is only these weeds that as you said, Patanjali said, like it could be like in this lifetime or previous lifetimes. Those things grow roots and grow, and eventually you forget who you are, which is what is happening to us, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It becomes unrecognizable. It's just a
Yeah.
jungle, really. Jungle
Yeah.
means, there's no rhyme or reason. It just goes every direction.
Yeah.
And so Chaitanya comes as the gardener, and he says, okay, cultivate the best seed. It's called the bhakti seed. The bhakti, actually calls it the bhakti lata. Lata means a creeper, bhakti lata bij. So this creeper is so powerful, he says, if you plant this seed in your heart and you're a good gardener, and this is the process of bhakti, the practice every day, you water it and you weed and you put the fertilizer of your attention and so forth. He said that seed will sprout and it will grow beyond this universe. He go, it's a spiritual seed, and it can grow past the cosmic manifestation, past the demarcation of the universe into the fourth dimension that we've talked about before, into the anti-material realm where the laws of nature don't apply. And so he describes how even as you're living in this world, if you've been a good gardener and your seed is sprouted, even though you're going to work, you're attending Zoom calls, you're doing whatever you have to do to maintain your body, your consciousness is connected to a higher realm. Because that creeper grows up, as creepers do. I have a lot of jasmine here. They're amazing plants. They put out these runners. I was like, how do you do this? They put out runners that go all over into my neighbor's yard and everything, and they start climbing. And it's like, is that from you over there on the 50 yards away? And yes, so that's why Chaitanya gave this example of the creeper. It grows up, it catches on, and then it has the wherewithal to grow up and hold on to another realm of consciousness in the metaphor. So yeah, thank you very much, Badri.
We do have a couple of more questions and reflections. I'll read out. One of them is from Catherine saying, what type of mantra do you do for japa? How do you spell it, and how do you say, etc.? I think that will come to in the end of the session. And Ariana asks, I believe that karma meant if you did something bad or someone did something bad to you, then karma would take care of it. Can you explain further? So those are the two questions.
Yeah, karma comes from the root word kri in Sanskrit, which means action. So we have to act. We're either active on a physical level or on a mental level. It just says when you sleep, your physical limbs may be at rest, but your subtle body is always working. And when we talk about karma, there's a way in which everything has a reaction. So when we do something, then there's a law that says that I'll get an equal and opposite reaction for that. And from the reaction, there's a reaction. And from the reaction, there's a reaction. And I can go on ad infinitum. So karma gets quite complicated. And it's not so easy to untangle. That's when you have to bring in what our horticulturalist says here is a rototiller to really take out all of it and start over again. And so the mantra, it acts like that. It's very, very powerful. We can't do it by hand at that point. It's become so jungle-esque, the karma, the entanglements of karma. And karma, by the way, is not just bad, it's good and bad, but it's good and bad on the material level, which means that there's a balance we have in this world. Some activities are considered good, some are considered bad, but they all relate to our material body and mind. They have nothing to do with our conscious self, which is different from the body and mind. And karma is what perpetuates the body and mind. I'll just give a really brief explanation because I know we're out of time already. But as I've described before, karma starts on a subtle level as a seed. So when I take in an impression from the environment and it gets imprinted on my mind, Patanjali says it creates a mold. Like if you're walking in wet sand and you leave your footprint there, if someone were to come along and put plaster of Paris in that footprint, then let it dry and take it out, you'd have the form of a foot. And so similarly, everything that we do is manifest in the subtle level of our consciousness. And the next body we get is a filling in of all those impressions that we have. So we get a particular kind of body based on our consciousness, the impressions within our consciousness. This is how Patanjali describes it. And Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says exactly the same thing. It's a kind of technological process, albeit a subtle one that takes place. So when we talk about going above karma, we're actually talking about performing activities that are called akarma, and they produce no results and no material results. And so the chanting of the mantra, it's a transcendental mantra, and it takes us beyond the realm of the material impressions in our brain, in our chitta or our mind stuff, and it brings us to the spiritual platform. And so maybe we can show that mantra now since we've run out of time.
Yes.
And any other questions that came in, we'll carry them over to the next session. But so mantra meditation, meditation has the same root as medicine. It's a way of repairing any damage that's been done. And man means mind, and tra means to deliver, to lift up. So it comes as an avatar. Avatar means an entity that comes from a higher position to a lower position and helps us. So the first mantra that I recommend, as it's been passed down to me over many generations, is Nitai Gauranga. And this mantra describes the two avatars, Nitai and Gauranga. And the next mantra is called the Maha Mantra. It has these three words, Hare, Krishna, and Rama. And Krish means existence, Na means that which ends. So the way that one ends all material existence, all the weeds, the rototiller comes out, is Krishna. It also means, Sanskrit words have many meanings. Krishna also means the attractor, that which attracts us to all the the source of all beauty, all aesthetics come from Krishna. And Hare means the nurturing female energy that is all around us. And there's a source for all that called Hare or Hara. And Hare is the vocative form. So we're actually calling out in this mantra. And Rama means spiritual pleasure. It's a pleasure that's way beyond what we can get through stimulating our senses in this world. It comes from within, from the spiritual platform. And together, this mantra is a formula. You put the syllables together, it is passed down through many different channels, but you can trace it back to the Kali Santarana Upanishad, one of the oldest books in the world, where it gives this mantra and says that any complexities of life can be overcome by chanting this mantra. So let's do the first one a few times, and then we'll do the second one a few times. So if you want to sit up a little straighter than you were before, you don't always have to close your eyes for the mantra. You can concentrate on it on the screen. It's spelled phonetically here, but I'm going to say it 10 times. And if you like, you can repeat it along with me behind closed mics. Nitai Gauranga, 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 Nitai Gauranga. This is a very good mantra to say before doing the Maha Mantra, which is the most recommended mantra according to the Kali Santarana Upanishad and many other ancient wisdom texts. And now I'll do this one 3 times all the way through, and you can follow along if you like. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I recommend starting your day with the mantra meditation, and you'll notice that you get some opportunity to see what's going on inside of you. You'll notice more clearly the workings inside. You'll be able to see the garden. And also, it will give you an opportunity to pull the weeds. Best time to pull the weeds is right after it rained. And when it rains, when it's dry and hard, the ground's hard, it's very difficult to pull out weeds. So this mantra is like rain. It comes down, it rains on your consciousness. It brings this nourishment and also loosens up the weeds. And then it's much easier to pull them out. And it's exactly what the wisdom texts say. By chanting this mantra, you'll notice the weeds are much easier to pull out. You might be thinking, I'll never be able to overcome these particular habits that are dragging me down. But after you chant the mantra, you'll notice at least the impetus will come up and go like, well, maybe I can. And that's one of the special benefits that comes from repeating the mantra. Let's just see anybody's still on who wants to make a comment or a reflection, because a lot of these sessions, it's really fun when you just come on and say what was on your mind. What are you taking away from the session? Anything that's stuck in your mind?
Wolf just asked a question. Was there anyone trying to join in? No. Wolf asked a question. Your opinion on teaching of Alan Watts, please.
Well, that's a complex question, and I'll have to come back to that one in the next session if it's okay, Wolf.
Sure. And then Ariana asked, do you think you can provide a picture of your garden?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll take a picture. It's not the best time of year, although that, that's probably a lame excuse. Obviously, springtime is the best. We're heading into winter right now, but I will do that. I'll take a picture and I'll send it to you. I also have a greenhouse where I keep a lot of more exotic plants like Stephanotis and plumarias and Tulsi, who's the empress of the garden here, and many others. So yeah, thanks for asking, Ariane. I'll send you. You have a garden?
Yes, we do.
Oh, I'd love to see it too.
Yes, I can provide pictures. It's definitely not addicting, but it's always nice to see the flowers. We still have a lot of the like iceberg roses that are those, right? Those last a long time. So it's always nice to kind of go out and see all the flowers.
It is. I love doing that. And I always am fascinated by the way that each plant has developed a way to provide for itself. Like those iceberg plants have these cells that are very efficient at storing water. So they don't need so much water like other kinds of plants that aren't used to that environment.
Yeah, I think throughout what I heard, I kept laughing because my husband is the one that really takes care of the garden. So I'll walk out and I'm like, oh, everything's so beautiful. And he's like, yeah, it's all the time you come out and talk to them. But right. He's just being a little mean because he's really the one out there watering and taking care of it. But he's like, yeah, it's every time you come out here and talk to them. So what you said really kind of made me think about that. So thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. It carries over to if you see somebody that's got integrity, they're upright, they have a modicum of sense control and so forth, they've worked on themselves. It just doesn't happen automatically. If you just let yourself go, even physically, if you let yourself go, it goes to default mode, especially after 30. A good garden means there's some intelligence behind it. Somebody's doing something. I can't wait to see your garden, Ariana.
Yeah.
The garden challenge is on now. All right.
Yeah, I can add a few tasks or maybe a separate category within the spiritual fitness challenge garden section. Next, we have Divya. Can you talk about spiritual ascension?
About what?
Kundalini, spiritual ascension and Kundalini.
Yes. Really, these have to do with a very kind of technical and mechanical way of moving prana, which is a very essential kind of energy. It's actually the energy that moves everything here in the universe and also within our bodies up the various chakras of the spine. And this takes a lot of practice and a lot of work to be able to understand where these energies are situated and then to be able to move them up the spine. One of the ways of developing this similar kind of energy, as is mentioned in many of the ancient texts, is through mantra. For instance, the first mantra that we chanted, Om, at the beginning, is said to resonate already within the Muladhara chakra. And when you physically enunciate the mantra and you listen to it, it starts to resonate with the mantra that's unstruck. In other words, it's not physical sound, it's an unstruck sound within that chakra. And you start to activate those energies, and they also will come to life in your mental system. So there are many there are many a nexus within these various disciplines of yoga, including Kundalini and Bhakti and so forth, and mantra meditation. Okay. Anything else, JM?
Yeah, we do have one more, but if somebody else wants to join in, please.
Yeah, it's always good to hear your voices. Anything that you heard that stuck? You want me to, shall we extend the metaphor again sometime, or should I forget all about gardening?
I like that the part that while we are in this world, still with that creeper, as it grows, it can intertwine the non-material world. I mean, it's basically you could be here but not here. You're still connected. That part gives me a lot of
Yeah.
hope that yeah, that was really nice.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, one last chance. Anybody wants to speak up?
Catherine,
Well,
I think you had a message. Do you want to say? Basically, she was appreciating that garden message was excellent and such a beautiful and applicable way to think about it. She's very thankful for that.
Who said that? Catherine?
Yeah, Catherine. And I think there is a call going on in the house, so that's why she's not able to speak.
Yeah, no problem. But I deeply appreciate it. And I deeply appreciate all of you. And you all hung in here till way past the time anyway. I thank you so much for joining. And keep watering that seed and think about the weeding process, how to pull out those weeds. And if you have more questions, we'll answer them. And Wolf, I'll get back to you about Alan Watt. And then sort of compare and contrast a little bit in a more thoughtful way in the next session, hopefully. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Please keep the transcendental vibration going. And remember, where attention goes, energy flows. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Josh. Bye, everybody. Bye, Wolf, Srivatsa, Barbara, Catherine, Ariana, Anupama, Sri Shah Jupal, Aditi, CK, Divya, Pawan. Thank you,